You're listening to the TheESP, the European Skeptics Podcast, an independent weekly show set out to bring you news, interesting topics and interviews with people mostly from Europe, building bridges and breaking down language barriers to show the world how active and awesome the skeptical movement is in the region. This is episode 514. I'm your host, András Pinter, and joining me for the show is my co-host, Pontus Böckman. Sia!
Hejsan, András! We are recording in very different climates from each other. You are in a place where it's very hot. Where are you?
I'm in Malaysia, actually.
Malaysia.
I'm in KL, Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah.
And even in the room, it's very, very hot. But my understanding is that the place that you are sitting in is much, much cooler.
Yeah.
I mean, in probably all sense.
Yes, I'm very cool. That's correct. But it's also very cool in the room I'm in. I'm in the basement of my house, and when it's very cold in the winter, the heating really can't fix that. So I have a couple of extra sweaters on, but that's fine. We can do this. Climate. I mean, the climate is changing. This is not a news item because we've talked about it so much, but 2025 was the third warmest year ever recorded, and it followed just behind 2014, which was the hottest so far, and 2023, that was the second warmest year. So, I mean, it is really happening. And last year, 2025, was supposed to be an La Niña, is it La Niña? La Niña year.
La Niña, yeah.
Yes, so that's supposed to be cooler, but still it made the top 3 ever recorded. So, yeah, no use going on about it because we all know what's happening, but it is happening.
Yeah, a lot of things are happening. We're going to mention a couple of them in the news segments, but why don't we focus on the usual parts of the show? So the first one of that is what we call This Week in Skeptical History. TWISH. So, this week, on Sunday, to be precise, we mark the birthday of Jacob Bronowski, or Jacob Bronowski, because he was a Polish-born British polymath, public intellectual, and, for many of us, a moral voice in the philosophy of science. And he was born on the 18th of January, 1908, and made a habit of reminding audiences that science is a human activity full of imagination, error, and responsibility. So, let's see about his career and why the introduction was about him being such an influential figure. So, Bronowski and his career crossed several worlds. He trained as a mathematician. He was born in Poland, but at the age of, I think he was 12, when the family moved out of Poland and eventually immigrated into Britain. So he was trained as a mathematician, he moved into biology, history of science, and broadcasting even. So he was a bit of a polymath. Hopefully not a besserwisser. I don't know about his actual character, but he had a couple of very interesting points. We might be featuring him at the end of the show, where we usually finish with a quote. So stay tuned for that. So, he is best known to most listeners as the writer and presenter of the 13-part BBC series and accompanying book, The Ascent of Man. Are you familiar with that, Pontus?
No, but I recognize that. I've heard about it, but I don't know about it, no.
Yeah. I only came across it in the form of the book. And I found it fascinating. I think it was when I was at university that I came across it, but I never saw the series, actually. This was a work that attempted, with unusual warmth and a bit of urgency as well, to tell the story of what makes humans capable of knowing the world. So it wasn't only about the history of scientific endeavor and how we got to know how the laws of the universe work, but also what motivates people, how it's a deeply human journey. And the whole series turned Bronowski into one of the era's most persuasive public defenders of science and popularizers of science. And why this matters to skeptics and students of scientific thought, it's because Bronowski argued again and again scientific knowledge is not something that some priest-like figures possess in an ivory tower, sitting in an ivory tower, and something that is then handed down to the average man, the low-life people, with the greatest certainty imaginable. So
that's religion you're describing now.
It is indeed. It is indeed. So it's nothing like that. Instead, it is a tradition of informed fallibility. So an imaginative, creative way we can test what we believe about the world against actual data we collect from reality. So that is a very forward-thinking approach, and it's a very human kind of approach as well. So he insisted that every scientific judgment stands on the edge of error. And it is precisely for that reason that it is worth respecting. I mean, science itself and scientific endeavor. Basically, that was his skeptical point: to value evidence, to prize correction, and to resist the comforting allure of absolute certainty, which is not possible to achieve when you're on a scientific way of getting to know the world. And you should be okay with that, as many science communicators have said since then. Bronowski also brought moral seriousness to the philosophy of science. One of the most striking moments in The Ascent of Man is his visit to Auschwitz, where he confronts the idea that science or technical expertise can be decoupled from ethics, and that's frightening. And to quote him, "This is what men do when they aspire to the knowledge of gods." And this is something that he said of the arrogance that substitutes dogma for judgment. A clear warning to all of us that method without humility and a moral compass can lead to oppression when actually we're seeking illumination. So it's a very deeply concerning thought, I think. For Bronowski, skepticism was inseparable from moral responsibility. We test claims, yes, of course, and we also ask what they make us do, what the results will lead to in humans actually acting on them. And that is a very important addition to what we already know and think about when it comes to science. And he was also a bridge builder, in a sense, because he refused the tidy division between arts and sciences. And I really subscribe to that. He insisted that imagination and symbolic thought are central to both science and arts. And that synthesis, communicating the wonder of discovery while insisting on critical standards and fact-based communication, influenced a whole generation of science communicators and public intellectuals. His combination of literary grace and scientific seriousness really helped make the case that defending reason does not need to be dry, nor public outreach shallow. So there is a way to do this. Now, I'm not sure he would agree with himself had he be living in today's world. Because unfortunately, it looks like the shallow kind of public outreach is what's most popular and most easy to put through.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I think there is something to take away from his work. I'd like to list here 3 short lessons from Bronowski's example. First of all, treat scientific claims as human achievements, powerful, open for improvement, and subject to moral judgment. Secondly, hold convictions, your own convictions, lightly. The strength of a claim lies in how it stands up to test, to scrutiny, not in how loudly it is declared and how strongly it is believed.
Hear, hear.
And the third is that in your communication, you need to bear in mind that skepticism succeeds when it's paired with clarity, imagination, and an insistence on public understanding. Exactly what Bronowski sought to do on television, in print, and on the lecture platform. So I really applaud him on the occasion of his birthday here. He died not long after the series aired, actually. He died in 1974, but his insistence that science is a very human form of knowledge, fallible, creative, and ethically charged, should speak to all of us trying to popularize science. For anyone who believes skepticism should be more than a reflexive naysay, which is definitely not the way to go about it. His work is a reminder that critical thinking must be practiced with not only enthusiasm, but humility and an awareness of the consequences.
Ah, that's interesting. And so he was around, he talked about skepticism, and that was still before the modern skeptical movement took form in the middle of the 70s,
yes.
really. Yeah.
Yes, so just about. It's a little bit similar to how Newton was born when Galileo died. So it's like, it's really, really a terrible thing that they never coexisted. So,
yeah. All right, interesting. I was not aware of him. I had heard a little bit, but I didn't recognize the name. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So let's move on to finding out what's been going on around Europe lately. Also known as the segment that we call the news.
Yes, and in Pontus Pokes Parolin news. So after our rant about Trump's kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro last week, well, we ranted about it last week, I have a pretty sensational follow-up, and I don't think that's gotten enough attention, at least not in my news flow. And in the past, I've talked a lot about the Vatican and the Pope, mostly, of course, about Frankie, not so much about Papa Bob, who took over after him. Papa Bob, yeah. Leo the 14th, also known as...
It's Leo.
Leo the 14th.
Your own son is called Leo.
Yeah, right. I give him the respect he deserves, right? So, okay, but if you want to be formal about it, his real name is Robert Prevost. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, so Leo is easier. Papa Bob is even easier.
Yeah.
Anyway, Papa Bob, Robert Prevost, he had a long career in South America before he became the Pope, and also so did Pietro Parolin, and maybe this is connected to this news item. Pietro Parolin, of course, being the Vatican Secretary of State. But the Washington Post revealed a pretty sensational fact about this astounding deposing of Maduro. Apparently, Parolin was deeply involved in trying to convince Maduro to voluntarily go to Russia for asylum before this happened. According to the Post, and it seems very well researched, Parolin urgently summoned the US ambassador to the Holy See, a guy called Brian Birch. Parolin summoned him on Christmas Eve last year, and he demanded to know what the US was up to when it came to Venezuela, whether they were going after the drugs, as was the official story back then, almost forgotten now, I think, or if they really wanted to provoke a regime change and get rid of Maduro. So Parolin was the Vatican's representative to Venezuela, or the Pope's apostolic nuncio, when Maduro was vice president. So Parolin was in Venezuela between 2009 and 2013. And he has met Maduro during this time. There are pictures of them together. So I wonder if that has something to do with it. So I don't know if they were buddies like that or if they was just a coincidence. But what Parolin now suggested to the American ambassador was that Maduro should be offered a way out and a way to leave his post, go to Russia, and the Vatican apparently had negotiated something with Putin so that Putin would accept Maduro. Maduro could keep all his money and go there and live his, luxury life for the rest of his life, I guess. But the plan didn't work because Maduro refused. He rejected this deal more than once, apparently. And I don't think Maduro really thought he would be kidnapped by Trump. Maybe he would have taken the easier way out if so. But I'm astounded. What's going on here? Why is the largest religious organization in the world negotiating with superpowers to save dictators? What are they doing?
I can't wrap my head around this. It's ridiculous.
Crazy town. First of all, saying it again, Maduro was a gangster. He deserved something, right? But kidnapping of presidents should not be the normal way of dealing with this. And religious leaders should not be involved in doing so. And of course, not the president of the United States either. But giving a mean dictator a luxury life, a free haven, is not something for the Pope or the Vatican to be involved with. I'm just shocked.
So much for their moral leadership.
Indeed.
Well, not the first time that we see it destroyed completely, but that's yet another example of that. Yeah. Wow. Okay, speaking of moral leadership, when it comes to science and science communication and all that, unfortunately there are actors who try to, not necessarily actively try, but happen to derail all that and push us into the realm of pseudoscience instead. And one of those people just died at the age of 90, Erich von Däniken.
Yeah.
The Swiss author, best known for popularizing the ancient astronaut hypothesis, the paleoastronautics, the idea that early human civilizations needed extraterrestrial help to build monuments, develop technology, or generally achieve anything impressive. So this is not a regular obituary. I'm going to have to warn everyone listening to this. Obviously, a writer died and a person died, so that's very sad. And I think, had he been a writer of science fiction, for example, that would have been quite good, but this is not how he portrayed his own work. He tried to parade as some kind of a guy who asks the scientific questions and tries to provide evidence to them. But the way he provided evidence was nothing like that of science. Just to give everyone a bit of an idea as to how he was, he really became internationally famous in 1968 with his work, The Chariots of the Gods, a book that argued that structures like the pyramids, the Nazca lines, and various megalithic sites were simply too advanced for the people who actually built them. Aliens, he suggested, were the more plausible explanation, and that was the pattern throughout his whole career. The book was an enormous commercial success, selling tens of millions of copies and followed by other successful books of a similar kind, and effectively founding the modern genre of pseudo-archaeology and pseudo-history. That is quite a responsibility for just one man to come up with completely new fields of pseudoscience. That is absolutely phenomenal. And over the following decades, von Däniken published more than 40 books, repeating variations of the same claims, and his ideas became a staple of documentaries and television series that presented speculation as mystery and mystery as evidence. And from the start, his work was unequivocally rejected by archaeologists, historians, and all kinds of representatives of science. Most of the critics just pointed out that persistent factual errors existed in his works. He selectively used any kind of evidence to support his ideas and completely ignored everything that didn't. So there's classical cherry picking. And he had a consistent tendency to underestimate ancient peoples while overestimating extraterrestrials, to which there is absolutely no freaking evidence whatsoever that they visit Earth. So none of his central claims were ever supported by credible evidence or accepted within any scholarly field. And I have to mention that outside his publishing career, von Däniken's life also included legal trouble. Because in his early years in the hotel business that he was in, well, he tried his luck in all kinds of different things.
He did spend a year in jail or so, I seem to have read.
Yeah, he was actually convicted of fraud and embezzlement. And some of his early writing was produced while serving prison sentences. Yeah, he really had enough time to come up with all kind of shit that he then promoted. So despite all his history like that, he maintained a loyal following and had an undeniable impact on popular culture. Much of today's fascination with lost civilizations, as they say, ancient aliens and forbidden history, can be traced directly back to his work. So that's quite an impact that he had. Yeah. So Erich von Däniken, who died on the 10th of January at the age of 90, that's quite an achievement, actually. But he leaves behind a legacy that is influential, profitable, and culturally persistent, but scientifically unsupported. And I would even dare say that it's very, very harmful when it comes to communicating real science on those fields of history, archaeology, and the like. For skeptics, his career remains a clear illustration of how easily good stories can outpace good evidence. Yeah. So...
Yeah, and as you say, the legacy lives on. We have Graham Hancock, who is behind the TV series Ancient Apocalypse, just rehashing a lot of von Däniken's ideas, and of course have been debating Flint Dibble on the Joe Rogan Experience. And but it seems like people can't let go of this idea. And to be honest, I like the idea, or I used to like it a lot. I don't think I ever bought into it, but I was fascinated by it. And I am a big Tintin fan, the character Tintin. And there is an album, a Tintin album, a book, which is very, very influenced by von Däniken. It's from the early 70s. So the idea was around there, or maybe it was late 60s even. It's called Flight 714, I think, to Sydney. So it's about Tintin and his guys. They are going to Sydney, Australia, and the plane gets hijacked, and they actually encounter aliens and an ancient astronaut things. And it's a pretty spaced out Tintin album. I think Hergé, the author, had experimented with some LSD. I can't prove that, of course, but I wouldn't be surprised. I remember reading this as a 10-year-old and said, what the hell is going on here? This is really wild. Tintin usually doesn't do things like that, but okay. Anyway, so I was fascinated by the idea of visitations from ancient aliens, but never bought into the idea. But a lot of people do still.
I actually did. So you're probably aware that at the beginning or before my skeptical journey, I used to be a big believer in UFOs. Mm-hmm. And I came across some of the works of Däniken as well, and also those of Graham Hancock. So I think I was in high school when the first Graham Hancock book came into my sight. So pretty long time ago. Yeah. But I'd like to mention, now that you dropped the name of Flint Dibble, that on episode 451, we had an interview with many of the QED goers, including among those Flint Dibble. Yeah, that's a bit of a longer interview. With Flint Dibble, I talked for about half an hour, and that was very enjoyable. So if you're interested in how he debated Graham Hancock, then go ahead and listen to it if you haven't yet, or if you just want to re-listen.
Recommend it very much. All right, so I have a quick follow-up from last week's topic of Google offering up misleading AI overviews for medical queries. After the findings and the critique from The Guardian, Google has now reacted, and the following questions do no longer generate an AI overview. And the questions that they have removed this overview from is, what is the normal range for liver blood tests? Or what is the normal range for liver function tests? Very specific wordings there. So for those two specific questions, you no longer get this AI-generated summary. But the problem with these queries, of course, is that liver function tests, or LFT for short, that is a collection of different blood tests, and understanding the results and what to do next is complex, and it involves a lot more than just comparing sets of numbers. The overviews did not inform about how the values can be very different from different people, depending on who you are, due to age or sex or physical characteristics or so. They can be very different. What's normal for one person doesn't have to be normal for another guy. But even though this seems to be a step forward for Google, it's not that a lot of things have changed, because if you just vary these questions a little bit, which The Guardian did to test it, so they tried, quote, LFT reference range, quote unquote, or LFT test reference range, quote unquote, that still prompted AI overviews. So they haven't actually fixed the problem. They've just took two different questions and they banned those specifically. So, I don't know. I think they have more work to do there. And I think what they should do instead, of course, is to ban all AI overviews for any health-related question, because you never know what this machine can come up with. The Guardian checked the answers with experts, as I talked last week, and they labeled some of the answers as completely wrong, quote unquote, or really dangerous, even in some cases. So, So don't trust the AI-generated summaries. Double and triple check everything, not just when it comes to health-related issues, but especially for them.
Of course. Okay, so there is a bit of an issue with other ways of dealing with problems. You would think that authorities are there to handle some kind of issues. And there is like alerts to other countries when someone is guilty of medical misconduct. And you would think that they would prevent them from practicing in other countries. But apparently, there's a systematic failure in how EU countries handle international notifications about doctors who have been disciplined or barred from practicing in another member state. That is the result of an investigative project involving more than 50 news outlets that the Hungarian fact-checking organization Átlátszó was part of, and this is their report that I'm basing this on. So, as a bit of a background, under European Union rules, when a physician is suspended or permanently banned from practicing in one member state, authorities are required to notify all other member states through something that is called the Internal Market Information System, or IMI. And these alerts are intended to help national regulators prevent disciplined doctors from simply relocating and continuing clinical work elsewhere within the EU, right? However, this investigation found out by obtaining internal documents that half of the EU member states had their authorities not even opening or reviewing any of the alerts sent by foreign regulators over the past 2 years. Half of them. So, among the worst performing countries was, I'm sorry to report, Hungary, which, according to the data, did not open a single one of more than 500 alerts received via the IMI system between 2024 and 2025. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So that means that basically anyone who was barred from practicing medicine in any other country would not be caught in Hungary. They could just simply relocate to Hungary and keep practicing. That is just outrageous. So the documents include specific cases highlighting the consequences of this inaction. And I'd like to mention this because it involves a Swedish licensed psychiatrist who was convicted of possessing and distributing child sexual abuse material, including images involving infants. And he was barred from practice.
Yeah, and rightly so. Yes.
Obviously, Sweden issued an alert to all member states. And despite all this, Portuguese authorities did not open the alert and subsequently authorized the doctor to practice in Portugal.
Wow.
And that is just one of the hundreds of examples. The investigation also documents other serious cases where physicians banned or disciplined for clinical misconduct were nonetheless licensed to work in other countries because the local regulator either did not open the alert or struggled with the IMI system and its usability and its data limitations. So in some cases, people working for the authorities basically struggling to understand how the system works. That is just mental.
So what is the biggest problem here? Is the problem that the system sucks, the computer system sucks, or is it that the authorities do not pay attention to this? Maybe it's both, I guess.
I don't know if it has something to the authorities being overwhelmed with other stuff, but this is quite an important element of their work, right? And officials from Hungary's National Hospital Directorate responded to inquiries by stating that they handle and process all information received through the IMI system, and that they check with foreign authorities when a doctor applies for recognition of qualifications in Hungary. But then, what leads to the actual problem, as you asked? It's beyond me. They did not clarify, though, what happened specifically to the alerts referenced in the investigation that were shown not to have been opened at all. They also noted that information from the IMI cannot automatically determine whether a foreign disciplinary decision affects a doctor's right to practice domestically. So this could be something that authorities can reference as like a lightening factor to this. But some critics say that the IMI system itself has technical and operational shortcomings, as you tried to allude to as well, such as lack of personal data in alerts, which makes it difficult for regulators to match notifications to individuals in their national databases. Some national authorities have publicly acknowledged lacking resources to manually process alerts day to day. So that is one of the factors as well, apparently. As I said, they're just overwhelmed. But I think this investigation raises very important concerns that patients in multiple EU countries may be treated by doctors with histories of serious misconduct or criminal conviction, simply because regulators did not actively review or act on international alerts, which were designed to prevent such situations in the first place. So it's just one thing to have those systems in place, but someone has to actually utilize them as well. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, right. So I have two news items about the awards that we in the Swedish Skeptics, the VOF, give out every year. So we give out two awards, a positive award for someone who's done something very positive, something to promote science or facts, or maybe to dispel myths or misinformation. And that award we call the Enlightener of the Year award. Then we have the negative prize, which is a shaming award for someone who's done the opposite, the dreaded Confounderer of the Year award. So the first news about this is that there is a lady called Linda Karlström who got the Confounderer of the Year award for 2020. And she has now had a bad day in court, which makes me a little bit happy. Karlström is an anti-vaxxer. She is a conspiracy theorist. She is a Holocaust denier. And she got the award for spreading dangerous anti-vax disinformation during the pandemic. In the aftermath of this, she sued SVT, which is the Swedish state television, for defamation, because they did an undercover investigation about her and infiltrated her closest surrounding people, and they caught her on video with a concealed camera. And what she said then was all kinds of crazy shit, but including the Holocaust denier thing, which wasn't actually known to the public before that she was that extreme. And then they broadcasted this on Swedish national television. And Karlström took them to court for that. And in the lowest court of the land, she actually won. And SVT was told to pay her about 9,200 euros in damages. This is not the US. You don't get a lot of money for these things in Sweden. So the damage payment is rather low. We're not talking millions and millions. But I think I mentioned that on one episode way back. But the news now is that the verdict was overruled in the next legal instance. And now the High Court of Sweden has denied further appeals. So there was no damages that they had to pay to her after all. So that's a good outcome. Finally, it's taken like 4 or 5 years. But it's important because if the first verdict had remained, that would have had a negative effect on stories like this in the future, because news outlets would be a little bit hesitant to do this kind of undercover things in the future. And I think they need to do that in some cases. So that was the first news. The second news is that last week, VOF announced the recipients of the awards for 2025. And the Enlightener of the Year for 2025 is a lady called Sarah Shepard. She is a children's books author who is writing for very young children. 3 to 6 years old is the recommended age for her books. And the reason she got the prize is that she teaches young kids about evolution and zoology, and she scientifically accurately gives information about dinosaurs and things like that in a way that they can appreciate and like and be entertained by. So these are very good books, loved by many children, always very well researched. She is, of course, a science nerd at heart, and she always makes sure that everything she writes is scientifically accurate. So big congratulations to her.
Yeah.
Now, the Confounderer of the Year award for 2025 went to a lobby organization for snus. So now we are talking, we talked about that last week as well. Mm-hmm. Especially we talked about white snus and how that's creating a new generation of nicotine addicts. So, of course, if listeners missed last episode, snus is a very Swedish thing, really. Original snus is tobacco that you put under your upper lip and eventually spit out, of course. Rather messy when it comes in the traditional way, when it comes as a loose grain or powder. But lately, or rather since quite a while back, it comes in pre-packaged little pouches that is a little bit easier to handle. But then there is also white snus, quote unquote. That is snus without tobacco, but with a lot of nicotine and other fancy flavors. Again, as we said last week, it's a little bit like vaping. It can be a good way to get people to quit smoking. You can go to something else instead. But this is an organization which is funded by the industry, is actively marketing white snus to young non-smokers. Statistics show now that 3/4 of white snus users has never been smokers before. And also that they are very young, or relatively young. There is an age limit of 18 years to buy it, but somehow even school children are getting hold of it. And the level of nicotine in these white snus is often very high. It's higher than in normal snus often. And that makes it very, very addictive. So this organization, and by the way, the organization is called Snuskommissionen, or the Snus Commission. And I'm happy to report that they've got rather annoyed by getting this award.
Really?
Yeah, that's always happy to... I'm always happy when we provoke a little bit of a response.
Yeah. But it didn't appear at the award ceremony, right?
There hasn't been an award ceremony yet.
No,
that will be... Okay. We announced it as a press release. There will be an annual meeting in April for the Swedish Skeptics. Okay. We may invite them.
Has there ever been someone who appeared at the award ceremony?
Actually, we have stopped trying to invite them because nobody ever shows up. So, well, maybe we will. We'll see if we will try that this year. But there was one or two guys online in social media who came after us, and they actually gave us a shame award back, which they called the Straw Man Award. So we have all the facts on our side, and we have done very, very thorough research, and we have, we've consulted with all kinds of experts and stuff, and we have long texts on our website to explain exactly how we have gone about that and why we gave them the award. So I think we've countered all their claims. But I'm impressed that they came up with a logical fallacy as a shameful award to us. That means that they are maybe a little bit aware of the skeptical movement. I don't know. They're still very wrong, though.
They probably learned something at least.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they learned from our webpage. Maybe they went to a webpage to find out. But they're not winning the argument. But it's telling that one of the people that came after us on social media, he is a self-proclaimed lobbyist. It says so. I think on his LinkedIn profile, he describes himself online as a lobbyist. So he's openly paid to try to sway the public on behalf of the industry. But hopefully he will not succeed now that we have called him out.
Actually, this is something that we skeptics should have on our side as well. People whispering in the ears of decision makers. But who will finance that? So that is an age-old question, and we don't have the answer yet. Otherwise, we would actually be lobbying for science and critical thinking in the large decisions. Yeah. Speaking of large decisions and authorities that I mentioned earlier, there are health authorities of certain countries, and they are usually providing vaccinations. And there are routine childhood vaccination schedules for many, many countries. Not a lot of countries have compulsory vaccinations included in that schedule, and that includes the United Kingdom as well, because their routine vaccination is basically vaccines on the childhood immunization schedule that are recommended but funded by the NHS, the National Health Service, and actively promoted by public health authorities. Parents are invited and reminded to do them, but they must give consent, so vaccination is basically voluntary, no compulsory by law. And at the same time, uptake is relatively high because the vaccines are free at the point of use. They are delivered through trusted NHS services. Recommendations are based on transparent scientific review, which is key, I think, here. And public health messaging focuses on benefit rather than coercion. So I think this is very important. And this is why I'd like to mention that the UK government just recently updated the routine childhood vaccination schedule. And some parents might be surprised by the announcement, especially those who are a little bit suspicious of vaccinations in general. But the change is actually responsive, evidence-driven public health practice rather than policy confusion or loss of confidence. And at the core of the update is the addition of routine chickenpox or varicella vaccination into the standard schedule. And this is something that Andrew Wakefield will scream for, because rather than adding another separate shot, the NHS will now offer a combined MMR-V vaccine that protects against measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox. And the importance of this approach is that it reduces the number of injections children receive, and it aligns the UK with other high-income countries that have used MMR-V for years now. So why I mentioned Andrew Wakefield is that originally it was the MMR vaccine that he claimed would cause autism in children. In addition, the schedule also introduces a new 18-month vaccination appointment. This visit will bring forward the second dose of the MMR, or MMR-V vaccine, and incorporate additional booster doses to maintain strong protection against serious childhood infections. Some of the older appointments, such as the HIV meningococcus C, I think, or meningitis C vaccine at 12 months have been reorganized or removed because of changes in disease patterns and vaccine supply, and because of older children and teens already receive strong protection through other immunization programs. What I'd like to emphasize here is that these kinds of adjustments are normal in vaccination programs. Schedules are continually reviewed by scientific advisory bodies like the UK's Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation to make sure that they reflect the latest evidence on disease risk, vaccine safety, and what will deliver the best protection when it matters most. And they are continually assessing data, adapting to new evidence, and improving protection for children where possible. So go science, and medical science is cool.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely upon time that you make the chickenpox vaccine part of the regular schedule, because it's not just having chickenpox is not fun. All my 3 children have had it. And I feel so sorry for them, or have done when that happened, because they're itching over. They all were very young when they got it, so you can't really argue with them. And they have these spots all over them, and it itches like hell, and it's miserable. But not only that, you never get rid of the virus. It just withdraws within you. And for many of us who are getting a little bit older, you have the risk of getting shingles, and shingles is not only very, very painful, I understand. You can, if you're very unlucky, if you get it near the eye, for instance, in the face, you can go blind if you are really unlucky, which is why I actually got vaccinated against shingles last year. As an older person, it's recommended. I'm 61, so... if anybody wonders. So, but the thing is, that's very costly. I had to pay, I think it was about €500 for the 2 shots, so $250 each.
Wow.
And it is costly also for the healthcare system, because you have to take care of a lot of people over 50 do get this, and it's you have to go to the hospital and stuff. So it is definitely upon time that it becomes part of the normal vaccination schedule. I'm not quite sure how it is in Sweden. My youngest is now 21, and when he was young, it wasn't part of the vaccination schedule. So maybe it is now, but I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. It's good to belong to a generation that has this, well, I wouldn't say luxury, but at least the opportunity to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
And go medical science and go medicine, because and we should be basing every medicinal decision on scientific evidence, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so let's move on from the news to finding out who's been really wrong lately.
Yeah, on episode 392, that is back in 2023, we covered how the WHO held their first, quote, summit on traditional medicine, end quote.
Oh, yeah.
In Gandhinagar in Gujarat in India. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. But that summit resulted in something that they called the Gujarat Declaration. More about that in a second. And David Gorski over at Science Based Medicine covered that as well at the time. And now they're at it again. It's still in India, but this time it's in New Delhi, and it's their second time. Probably not the last time. It happened in December, so last year, but I wasn't aware about it until now. And now, we have talked about in the past how the WHO is often disturbingly apologetic and positive when it comes to Eastern non-proven traditional medicine. It could be Indian medicine, Ayurveda and stuff, or traditional Chinese medicine, of course, as well. And that's very unfortunate and annoying. The theme this year for this summit was, quote, restoring balance, the science and practice of health and well-being, end quote. So they put science in the description there. But what they are trying to do is they want to prove, and they've said so directly, they want to prove that there is science behind these traditional remedies, which is the wrong way to go about it. Anyway, from the WHO website, I quote, the strategy focuses on 4 main objectives: strengthening the evidence base for traditional complementary and integrative medicine, TCIM, or as Edzoderns will call it, SCAM, of course, so-called alternative medicine. I continue the quote here. Supporting safe and effective TCIM through appropriate regulatory mechanisms, integrating safe and effective TCIM into health systems, and optimizing the cross-sector values of TCIM and empowering communities, yada, 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 end quote. But the thing, you hear what they're saying, that we want to find and prove that it works instead of saying...
Yeah, we have an agenda and we're looking for evidence to support it.
That's not science. That's not how science works. You know, in all these kinds of discussions, aspirin always comes up as an example, because that was sort of a traditional thing, the bark from the willow tree and blah, blah, blah. And then you discover that it did actually work using science, and now we can manufacture it in the labs and we don't need the willow anymore. But that is an exception. There are thousands and thousands of different traditional so-called remedies, and most of them do not work. Maybe we found one, or maybe 2, or a couple.
No, there are a lot, but still.
Okay. But
it doesn't necessarily mean that every one of them will prove to be working.
Yeah. And this is not something that the WHO needs to lead to discover new things, because I'm sure that the pharmaceutical industry, they're looking at this already, and they have been looking at this for decades, and they're still looking. And if they found something, they will make a proper medicine out of it. That's how it is. In this is things like Reiki and mumbo-jumbo and prayers and... Anyway... I'm getting worked up, so it'll probably... I should probably finish off the segment by saying, for continuing to promote the idea that traditional, unproven so-called medicine holds some kind of forgotten and neglected benefits, the WHO gets this week's award for being really wrong.
Very well deserved. They should know better, and they should not suck up to the countries that want this to be put through. Because I have a feeling, and some of the analysts about this, and some of the people like David Gorski as well, they wonder if this is because of the United States backing out of the WHO, and now they are trying to appeal to countries like China that have a big influence. But this just further degrades the prestige and the standards of WHO, so making it basically an obsolete, not reliable organization whatsoever.
And they do a lot of good things as well. We must remember that. But that's why it's so dangerous when they also do bad things, because they have their reputation, they have their credibility, and when they are backing things like TCI...
They destroy that reputation.
Yeah, they do that. So not only destroying that reputation, but some people will believe that they are right because they have that good reputation. So
And other people will rightly say that they promote this nonsense, so whatever else they recommend is basically nonsense and not to be taken seriously. Yeah. So that is the risk as well.
Boo.
All right. Boo, boo, boo. Thank you very much for that, Pontus.
Okay.
And let's move on to the last part of the show, which is when we share a quote. And I think this quote is just fitting. I didn't even realize this before we recorded the show, but I'm happy that I found this. And this is a quote from Jacob Bronowski, or Jacob Bronowski. Please, listeners from Poland, please let us know how to pronounce his name. But the quote is what is most important here. Of course, everyone is free to prefer his favorite article of faith to the scientific, that is the empirical method. But do not let us imagine that his faith is then anything except a piece of comfortable and customary superstition.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I have no comment. It speaks for itself.
No comment either on my end.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So the only thing that I'd like to say to close down this episode is that I'd like to thank you, Pontus.
Thanks a lot.
A lot of thanks to our listeners as well for tuning in. Please keep doing so. And until next week, goodbye.
Hej då!
Vislat! This has been your ESP experience. The show is produced and recorded by TheESP.eu. Join us again next time, but until then, please send your feedback and comments to info@TheESP.eu. We would also love to hear your ideas and suggestions regarding topics, and if you have any skeptical news from any European country, we're always eager to hear about them. If you have an upcoming local event or an organization to promote, please don't hesitate to let us know, as we are more than happy to help. All music in the program was written and performed by Keisha J. Gray and George Robb and is used with their permission. Please check out our webpage for show notes and archive material at theesp.eu. Follow us on Blue Sky at theesp.bsky.social. Like us on Facebook or support our work on patreon.com/theesp. And don't forget to spread the word by sharing our content with others.
I don't know how you can believe.
And that synthesis, yeah.
But the news now is that the verdict... I'll start that over. Using science, and now we can synthesizers. We can manufacture it in the...
There you go.